The suitcase wheels caught on the cobblestone, nearly sending Grace Evans' tumbling face first into a puddle outside the Barcelona hotel. And she wondered for the 100th time why she had let her best friend convince her that a solo vacation to Spain was exactly what she needed after quitting her soul-crushing marketing job back in Chicago. The lobby of Hotel Casa Marina gleamed with polished marble and ornate chandeliers, far fancier than the pictures online had suggested. Grace approached the reception desk, her rusty high school Spanish already failing her as she tried to check in. The receptionist smiled patiently, switching to English when Grace's attempt at asking for her room key came out as something about needing a beach towel and a horse. "Miss Evans, yes, we have you for 2 weeks," the young woman said, typing efficiently. "You are on the 4th floor, room 412. Breakfast is served from 7 to 10, and if you need any recommendations for restaurants or attractions, please ask." Grace thanked her and headed toward the elevator, exhausted from the transatlantic flight and the train ride from the airport. She just wanted to collapse on the bed and sleep for 12 hours. The elevator doors were closing when a hand shot through, triggering the sensor. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair slightly tousled and eyes the color of strong coffee. He wore a simple white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, and Grace found herself staring at his hands before quickly looking away. "Which floor?" he asked, his accent distinctly American, though his voice had a rough quality that suggested he had been speaking Spanish all day. "4, please," she managed, noticing he had already pressed the button. "You too, 5, actually." He glanced at her with a slight smile. "Just arrived, that obvious." Grace gestured to her wrinkled travel clothes and the fact that she probably looked half dead. "The suitcase and the dazed expression gave it away," he said, but his tone was warm, not mocking. "First time in Barcelona." "Yes, I have been here a few times, for work mostly." The elevator dinged at the 4th floor. "Enjoy your stay." "Thanks," Grace said, dragging her suitcase into the hallway. She glanced back just before the doors closed, catching him watching her with an unreadable expression. In her room, she unpacked quickly and fell into bed, setting an alarm so she would not waste the entire first day sleeping. When she woke 4 hours later, the sun was still high, and her stomach reminded her she had not eaten since the airplane breakfast that barely counted as food. She showered, changed into a sundress, and ventured out into the Barcelona afternoon with a determination to actually enjoy herself. Her best friend Melissa had been relentless about this trip after Grace had quit her job at the marketing agency. 3 years of creating soulless ad campaigns for products she did not believe in had finally broken her spirit. She had savings, no boyfriend, and no real plan for what came next. Melissa had practically shoved the plane ticket in her face. The Gothic Quarter charmed her immediately with its narrow medieval streets and hidden plazas. She wandered aimlessly, stopping at a small cafe for coffee and a pastry, watching street performers and tourists flow past. For the first time in months, she felt her shoulders relax. "Small world," a voice said, and Grace looked up to see the man from the elevator standing beside her small table. He held his own coffee cup and had a leather messenger bag slung across his chest. "Hotel neighbor," Grace said, surprised into a genuine smile. "Are you following me? Considering I was here first, I think you are following me," he replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Mind if I sit? Every other table is taken." She nodded, and he settled into the chair with the easy confidence of someone comfortable anywhere. Up close, she could see he had a small scar above his left eyebrow and the kind of tan that came from actually being outdoors, not from a bottle. "I am Patrick, by the way. Patrick Finley." Grace Evans. So what brings you to Barcelona, Grace Evans? Besides the obvious tourist appeal. She found herself telling him about quitting her job, about needing a break from her life in Chicago, about how she had no idea what she wanted to do next. It felt surprisingly easy to talk to him, this stranger in a foreign country who had no connection to her regular life. Patrick listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was actually interested. When she finally stopped talking, slightly embarrassed by how much she had shared, he said, "That takes courage. Most people stay in jobs they hate because it is safe. Or foolish. The jury is still out." "Not foolish," he said firmly. "Life is too short to spend it miserable." He checked his watch and grimaced. "I hate to drink and run, but I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Are you free for dinner tonight?" Grace hesitated only a moment before saying yes. He suggested a restaurant near the beach, wrote down the address, and promised to meet her there at 8. As she watched him walk away, weaving through the crowded plaza with purposeful strides, she wondered what exactly she had just agreed to. Back at the hotel, she changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress and sandals. She told herself it was not a date, just a friendly dinner with someone who happened to be staying in the same hotel. But her racing heart suggested otherwise. The restaurant overlooked the Mediterranean, with tables set up on a terrace that caught the evening breeze. Patrick was already waiting, changed into dark jeans and a gray shirt that made his eyes look almost silver in the fading light. "You found it," he said, standing as she approached. "GPS is a beautiful thing," Grace replied, taking the seat he pulled out for her. They ordered wine and paella, falling into conversation as easily as they had at the cafe. Patrick asked about her life in Chicago, her family, what she liked to do when she was not working at a job she hated. She learned he had grown up in Boston, had a younger sister who was a teacher, and spent most of his time traveling for work. "What kind of work keeps you traveling so much?" Grace asked, savoring the perfectly seasoned seafood. "I run a company that manufactures sustainable packaging materials," Patrick said. "We work with businesses that want to reduce their environmental impact. It means a lot of meetings with potential clients, visiting production facilities, that sort of thing." "That actually sounds meaningful," Grace said. "Unlike convincing people they need another type of overpriced water bottle." Patrick laughed, a real laugh that made his whole face change. "Is that what you were doing?" Among other things. Every campaign felt like lying honestly. "These products are not going to change your life, they are just things. But you are good at it, I bet." "Good at lying? Maybe." Grace sipped her wine. "I think I am good at understanding what people want to hear, which is a useful skill, just not one I want to use anymore." They talked through dinner and dessert, through another glass of wine, until the restaurant began to empty, and the waiter started giving them pointed looks. Patrick paid before Grace could argue about splitting the check, and they walked along the beach as the waves rolled in under a sky full of stars. "This is not how I expected today to go," Grace admitted, her sandals dangling from her fingers as she walked barefoot in the sand. "Bad or good? Unexpected? Good, definitely good." She looked at him sideways. "Do you do this often? Pick up random women at hotels?" "Never, actually." Patrick stopped walking, turning to face her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There is something about you, Grace. I cannot quite explain it." "I know what you mean," she said softly. He kissed her then, gentle and questioning, and she kissed him back with an answer that said yes. "This is what I want too." The waves crashed beside them, and Grace felt like she was in a movie, some romantic fantasy that could not possibly be real life. They saw each other every day after that. Patrick would finish his meetings, and Grace would wait for him at various cafes or museums, exploring Barcelona while counting the hours until evening. They ate dinner at tiny restaurants locals recommended, drank wine on rooftops, got lost in the winding streets of El Raval, and talked about everything from childhood memories to fears about the future. "I have 3 days left," Grace said one night as they sat on the steps of the Palau National, looking down at the illuminated fountains. Then back to reality. Patrick was quiet for a moment, his arm around her shoulders. "What if reality followed you home?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I do not want this to end when you get on that plane." He turned to look at her directly. "I know this is fast, I know we barely met, but I have not felt this way in a long time, maybe ever." Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. "Patrick, you live in Boston, I live in Chicago. You travel constantly for work. Those are logistics, not reasons to say goodbye." His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. "Just think about it, please." She thought about little else over the next 3 days. They spent every possible moment together, and the intensity of it both thrilled and terrified her. This was supposed to be a vacation fling, a story to tell Melissa over too much wine. It was not supposed to feel like something that could reshape her entire life. On her last night, Patrick took her to a restaurant he said was his favorite in the entire city, a small family-run place tucked into a quiet neighborhood far from the tourist areas. They ate slowly, making the evening last, and Grace memorized everything about him. The way he listened with his whole attention, how he touched her hand when making a point, the laugh lines around his eyes. "Come back with me tomorrow," he said over coffee. "Or let me change my flight. We can have a few more days. You have meetings in London on Monday. You told me. I can reschedule." "Patrick." Grace set down her cup carefully. "I do not even know what I am doing with my life right now. I do not have a job. I do not have a plan. I cannot commit to a long-distance relationship when I do not know what I am committing to. So we figure it out together." "How?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "You are gone 6 months out of the year. I need to find work, rebuild my career. I cannot just put my life on hold waiting for you to have free time." Patrick's jaw tightened. "Is that really what you think I am asking?" "I do not know what you are asking." Grace felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "This has been incredible. You have been incredible. But I live in the real world where vacations end and rent needs to be paid." They finished dinner in heavy silence. Patrick walked her back to the hotel, and at her door, he pulled her into a kiss that felt like goodbye even though neither of them said the word. Grace went to bed with tears soaking her pillow, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision possible. The flight home felt endless. Grace stared out the window at clouds and ocean, replaying every conversation with Patrick, torturing herself with what-ifs. She had his number. He had hers. But neither had called or texted, and with every hour that passed, it seemed less likely they would. Chicago welcomed her back with rain and traffic. Her apartment felt too quiet, her bed too empty. Melissa came over that first night with takeout and wine, demanding details. "So you met a hot guy, had an amazing 2-week romance, and just walked away?" Melissa stared at her like she had lost her mind. "Grace, come on. It was a vacation fling. That is what it was supposed to be." "That is what you told yourself it was supposed to be," Melissa corrected. "But that is not what it actually was. I can see it on your face." Grace pushed noodles around her plate. "Even if I wanted to pursue it, how would that work? He is in Boston, probably flying to some other country by now. I need to focus on finding a job." "You are scared," Melissa said bluntly, "which I get because opening yourself up is terrifying. But you quit a stable job because you were miserable. Do not talk yourself out of something that makes you happy just because it is complicated." Over the next 2 weeks, Grace threw herself into job hunting. She updated her resume, reached out to contacts, had phone interviews with 3 different agencies. Each one made her feel slightly sick to her stomach. The thought of going back to creating campaigns for products she did not care about. But she needed money, needed structure, needed to stop thinking about Patrick. She was walking home from a coffee shop interview that had gone badly when she saw the billboard. A massive advertisement for sustainable packaging featuring the logo and name, Finley Industries, Patrick's company. Grace stopped dead on the sidewalk, causing a man behind her to curse as he swerved around her. Patrick had mentioned his company was growing, but she had not realized the scale. She pulled out her phone and Googled it, finding article after article about Finley Industries, about their revolutionary biodegradable packaging, about their CEO Patrick Finley, who at 32 was revolutionizing the industry. Their CEO, Patrick, was not just someone who worked for the company. He owned it. He had built it. Why had he not told her? Grace scrolled through images of Patrick in suits at conferences, shaking hands with other executives, giving speeches about environmental responsibility. This was not the man in rolled-up sleeves drinking coffee at a Barcelona cafe. Except it was the same man. He just had not mentioned the part about being a millionaire CEO. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost ignored it but answered at the last second. Grace Evans, a woman's crisp voice. "This is Jennifer Walsh from the corporate offices of the Windsor Hotel Group. Your resume came across my desk, and I would like to discuss a position we have available." Grace had not applied to any hotels. "I think you have the wrong person. You are Grace Evans, formerly with Cascade Marketing in Chicago. You quit 3 weeks ago after 3 years with the company." "Yes, but your resume was forwarded to me by a contact who thought you might be a good fit for our Director of Brand Development position. It is based here in Chicago, though it requires some travel. Are you interested in hearing more?" Grace's mind raced. "Who forwarded my resume? I am not at liberty to say, but they spoke very highly of your skills. Can you come in for an interview? Tomorrow at 2. She agreed, hung up, and immediately called Melissa. "That is weird, right?" Grace paced her small living room. "People do not just randomly forward resumes to hotel corporate offices." "Maybe someone from your old job recommended you," Melissa suggested. "Then why not just say so?" But Grace had a sinking suspicion she knew exactly who had forwarded her resume, and the thought made her furious and touched in equal measure. The Windsor Hotel Group offices occupied 3 floors of a downtown skyscraper. Grace arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in her best interview suit, determined to get this job on her own merits regardless of how her resume had landed on their desk. Jennifer Walsh turned out to be a sharp woman in her 50s who spent 2 hours grilling Grace about her experience, her vision for brand development, her understanding of the hospitality industry. It was intense and challenging, and Grace left feeling energized in a way she had not felt about work in years. "We will be in touch by Friday," Jennifer said as she walked Grace to the elevator. "For what it is worth, I think you would be an excellent fit here." Grace floated home on a cloud of possibility. The job would be a significant step up in responsibility and pay. She would be shaping how an entire hotel chain presented itself to the world, working on campaigns that actually mattered to her, if she got it. She spent the next 3 days anxiously checking her phone. On Thursday evening, as she was making dinner, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you do not mind, but I wanted to make sure you were okay. I know I should have told you about the company, about everything." "I am sorry." Patrick. Grace stared at the message for a full minute. She had so many things she wanted to say, angry things and confused things and desperate things. Finally, she typed back, "Did you forward my resume to Windsor Hotels?" The response came immediately. "Yes." But only because Jennifer is an old friend and I knew she was hiring. I did not tell her to hire you. That decision is completely hers based on your qualifications. I just opened the door. You should have asked me first. You are right. I am sorry. Grace set the phone down, trying to sort through her emotions. Part of her was angry that he had interfered in her job search without asking. But another part, the part she was trying to ignore, was touched that he had thought of her at all, that he had tried to help even after the way they had left things. On Friday morning, Jennifer called with a job offer. Grace accepted immediately, and they agreed she would start in 2 weeks. She hung up and let out a whoop of joy, doing a little dance in her kitchen before calling Melissa to celebrate. That evening, she texted Patrick, "I got the job. Thank you for the connection, even though you should have asked first. Congratulations. You earned it on your own." Jennifer does not hire people as favors, no matter who asks. "Still, thank you." There was a long pause then. "Can I call you?" Grace's hand trembled slightly as she typed yes. Her phone rang 30 seconds later. "Hi." Patrick's voice sounded rough, like he had not been sleeping well. "Hi. I have been thinking about you every day since you left," he said without preamble. "I know you said you needed to focus on your life, and I respect that. But I cannot shake the feeling that we gave up on something really good because the timing was complicated. Patrick, you own a company. A major company. Why did you not tell me?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because every time I tell someone what I do, they look at me differently. They start seeing dollar signs instead of me. You just saw me as Patrick. It was refreshing. But it also was not completely honest. I know." "You are right. I should have told you." He took a breath. "Can we start over? Not from scratch, but from a place where we are both honest about everything?" "I live in Chicago," Grace said. "You live in Boston. That has not changed." "Actually, I have been thinking about that. Finley Industries is growing and we need to expand our Midwest presence. I have been looking at office space in Chicago." Grace sat down hard on her couch. "You are not moving to Chicago because of me. That is insane." "I am not moving only because of you," he corrected. "It makes business sense. But yes, you are part of the equation, a big part. This is too much, too fast. Then we go slow. I am in Chicago next week for meetings. Let me take you to dinner, just dinner. As friends, if that is what you want." Grace knew she should say no. Knew she should focus on her new job, on rebuilding her life, on not getting her heart broken by a long-distance relationship that probably would not work. But the word that came out was, "Okay." Patrick arrived in Chicago on a Tuesday, and they met at a restaurant in the West Loop that specialized in farm-to-table cuisine. Grace had changed clothes 4 times, finally settling on black pants and a green sweater that Melissa swore made her eyes look incredible. When Patrick walked in, her breath caught. He wore a suit this time, clearly coming straight from business meetings, and she could see what those articles had been talking about. This was CEO Patrick Finley, confident and powerful and slightly intimidating. Until he saw her and his face broke into that smile she remembered from Barcelona, and he was just Patrick again. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek in a way that felt both familiar and charged with possibility. They sat and ordered, and the conversation flowed like no time had passed. Patrick told her about the London meetings, about visiting the production facility in Amsterdam, about his sister's new boyfriend who his whole family adored. Grace talked about preparing for her new job, about apartment hunting in a better neighborhood now that she could afford it, about Melissa's latest dating disaster. "I have been thinking about what you said in Barcelona," Patrick said over dessert, "about not wanting to put your life on hold. You were right. That is not fair, and it is not what I want either. So what do you want? I want to build something real with you, but I want us both to have full lives while we do it. You focus on your career, I will focus on mine, and we figure out how to fit together around that. That sounds reasonable in theory, Grace said carefully. But you travel constantly. I do. Which means you will have plenty of space to pursue your own goals without me crowding you. And when I am in Chicago, which will be increasingly often, we make the most of our time together. What if it is not enough? What if we drift apart because we barely see each other? Patrick reached across the table, taking her hand. That is a risk. I will not lie and say it is not. But Grace, I have not been able to stop thinking about you for a single day. I do not think that is going away just because we are not in the same city every moment. Grace looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of his grip. I am scared, she admitted. Me too, but I am more scared of not trying. They left the restaurant and walked along the Chicago River, the city lights reflecting off the water. Patrick told her about the office space he was looking at, about his plans to hire a team in Chicago to handle Midwest operations. Grace talked about her ideas for the Windsor campaign, getting animated as she described her vision. You love it already, Patrick observed. The job. I do. I have not even started yet, and I can feel that it is different. I am going to be building something that matters, not just selling things. That is how I feel about Finley Industries, Patrick said. Every company we convert to sustainable packaging is a real impact. It is not just profit, though that matters too. It is leaving things better than we found them. They ended up at Grace's apartment, ostensibly for coffee, and spent 3 hours on her couch talking and kissing and talking some more. When Patrick finally left at midnight to catch his flight back to Boston, Grace felt like her heart might burst from the confusion of joy and fear swirling inside her. Over the next month, they talked every day. Long phone calls while Patrick was traveling, video chats where they ate dinner together from opposite sides of the country, constant texts about mundane details and major decisions alike. Patrick came to Chicago twice more, and Grace flew to Boston for a weekend, meeting his sister Emma, who interrogated Grace over brunch with the intensity of a protective sibling. He has not brought anyone home in 3 years, Emma confided when Patrick left to get more coffee. And he has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. We barely know each other, Grace protested weakly. You know the important things. The rest is just details. Grace threw herself into her new job with an enthusiasm that surprised her colleagues. She restructured the entire Windsor brand strategy, created campaigns that highlighted their commitment to local communities, and traveled to property locations to understand each hotel's unique character. Jennifer became both a boss and a mentor, pushing Grace to think bigger and trust her instincts. You have real talent, Jennifer told her after Grace presented a particularly innovative campaign. I am glad Patrick sent your resume my way. You know Patrick? Grace asked carefully. We have been friends for years. His company supplies all our packaging now, actually. He called me out of the blue and said he had met someone extraordinary who needed a fresh start. I told him I do not hire people as favors, and he said good, because you would get the job on your own merits or not at all. Jennifer smiled. He was right. 4 months into their relationship, Patrick flew Grace to Barcelona for a long weekend. They stayed at a different hotel this time, one even more luxurious, but visited all their old haunts. The cafe where they had first talked, the restaurant by the beach, the steps of Palau National. I need to tell you something, Patrick said as they watched the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Finley Industries has been acquired. Grace turned to him, startled. What? A larger corporation made an offer I could not refuse. It means I will stay on as president of the division, but I will not have to do as much traveling. I can actually be in one place. Patrick, that is huge. Are you okay with it? I am more than okay. I built the company to a point where it can have real impact now, bigger than anything I could do alone, and it means I can have a life outside of work. He took her hands. It means I can have a life with you if you still want that. Of course I want that, Grace said, feeling tears prick her eyes. I have wanted that since Barcelona. I was just too scared to believe it could work. Believe it, Patrick said, pulling her close. We are going to make it work. They flew back to Chicago together, and Patrick stayed the whole week, working remotely from Grace's apartment while she went to the office. It felt like a test run of real life, of what they could be together. They cooked dinner in her tiny kitchen, argued about what to watch on TV, and fell asleep tangled together every night. I am looking at a condo downtown, Patrick mentioned one evening as they did dishes. The office space lease is finalized, so I will be spending most of my time here now. Most of your time, unless you have objections to me being around more often. Grace threw a dish towel at him. No objections at all. Patrick's sister Emma visited for Thanksgiving, and Grace invited Melissa and her new boyfriend to join them. The 6 of them crammed into Grace's small apartment, cooking an elaborate meal that barely fit on the table. Emma and Melissa bonded immediately, ganging up to tell embarrassing stories about Grace and Patrick that had everyone laughing until they could barely breathe. I like your people, Grace told Patrick that night after everyone had left and they were cleaning up the debris. They are your people too now, he replied, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind as she washed dishes. If you want them to be. I do. Christmas came, and Grace flew to Boston to spend it with Patrick's family. His parents welcomed her warmly, his father asking intelligent questions about her work, while his mother showed her embarrassing baby photos of Patrick that made him groan. Emma gave Grace a framed photo of the 4 of them from Thanksgiving with a whispered, "Welcome to the family." On New Year's Eve, Patrick took Grace to the roof of his new Chicago condo building. The city stretched out below them, fireworks already starting in the distance as midnight approached. I have something for you, Patrick said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Grace's heart hammered. Patrick, it is not what you think. Not yet. He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a small compass pendant. I know we have only been together 6 months. I know it is too soon for the big question, but I want you to have this as a promise. No matter where we go, no matter what happens, we will always find our way back to each other. Grace's vision blurred with tears as he fastened it around her neck. I love you, she said, the first time either of them had said the words out loud. I love you too, Patrick replied, pulling her close as the clock struck midnight and the sky exploded with light. The next year passed in a blur of happiness. Grace was promoted to senior director at Windsor, overseeing brand development for their entire portfolio. Patrick's division of the new parent company thrived, expanding into international markets he had only dreamed of reaching. They traveled together when their schedules aligned, exploring cities across Europe and Asia. They spent quiet weekends at Patrick's condo, cooking elaborate meals and hosting dinner parties for their growing circle of mutual friends. Grace moved into Patrick's condo on a rainy April morning, Melissa and Emma supervising while the men hauled boxes. It felt right, natural, like they had always been moving toward this moment. Her things fit seamlessly into his space, their lives blending without the friction she had feared. Happy? Patrick asked that night as they lay in bed in their home, the words still feeling new and wonderful. Incredibly, Grace replied, tracing the scar above his eyebrow. Sometimes I think about that first day, running into you in the elevator. What would have happened if I had taken the stairs? I would have found another way to meet you, Patrick said with certainty. Some things are just meant to be. On the anniversary of the day they met, Patrick took Grace back to Barcelona. They stayed at Hotel Casa Marina, requesting room 412, where Grace had stayed that first trip. They visited every place that held a memory: the Gothic Quarter Café, the beach restaurant, the fountain steps. On their last night, Patrick led Grace to a rooftop restaurant she did not recognize. The space had been decorated with thousands of twinkling lights, and a single table sat in the center, set for two. "Patrick, what is this?" "This is me asking if you will marry me," he said, dropping to one knee and pulling out a ring that caught the light and threw rainbows across the rooftop. "I know I said that first year that I would wait, that it was too soon. But Grace, I have known since the day we met that you were it for me. You are my best friend, my partner, the person I want beside me for every adventure. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Grace said through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, and Patrick stood to kiss her as the lights of Barcelona sparkled below them. This was not how she had imagined her life going when she boarded that plane alone and afraid 2 years ago. It was so much better. They were married 8 months later in a ceremony that perfectly blended both their families. Emma served as Patrick's best woman, standing proudly beside him in a sharp suit. Melissa was Grace's maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony, despite joking beforehand that she never cried at weddings. Patrick's vows made everyone weep. He talked about the woman who had nearly tripped over her suitcase wheels, who had been brave enough to quit a job that made her miserable, who had taken a chance on a romance that seemed impossible. Grace's vows focused on the man who had seen her truly, who had supported her dreams while pursuing his own, who had shown her that love did not mean losing yourself, but finding yourself reflected in someone else's eyes. They honeymooned in Japan, exploring Tokyo and Kyoto, eating at tiny restaurants and staying in a traditional ryokan where they slept on futons and soaked in hot springs under the stars. It was different from Barcelona, but equally magical, a new memory to add to their collection. Back in Chicago, they settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Grace continued to excel at Windsor, eventually becoming vice president of brand development. Patrick's division launched a new line of completely compostable food packaging that won industry awards and caught the attention of major restaurant chains. They worked hard, traveled often, and made their home a sanctuary they both loved returning to. "I want to have a baby," Grace said one night as they cooked dinner together, nearly 2 years into their marriage. Patrick looked up from chopping vegetables, his face breaking into a huge smile. Yeah, I think I am ready. I think we are ready." "I have been ready since I met you," Patrick admitted, "but I was waiting for you to be sure." They started trying, approaching it with the same partnership they brought to everything else. It took 4 months before Grace's period was late, before she took the test with shaking hands, before she saw the 2 pink lines that changed everything. Patrick cried when she told him, actual tears streaming down his face as he pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. They told their families together over video calls, Emma screaming so loudly they had to hold the phone away from their ears. Grace's parents flew in from Seattle the next weekend, her mother already planning baby showers and nursery designs. The pregnancy was mostly smooth, though Grace spent the first trimester exhausted and nauseated. Patrick waited on her hand and foot, cooking bland foods that would not trigger her nausea, rubbing her feet every evening, reading baby books with an intensity usually reserved for business contracts. They found out at 20 weeks that they were having a girl. Grace watched Patrick's face as the ultrasound technician revealed the news, saw the moment pure love and terror crossed his features in equal measure. "I am going to be a total disaster," he confessed that night. "How do I raise a daughter? How do I protect her from the world while teaching her to be brave in it?" "The same way you love me," Grace said softly. "By supporting her dreams, by showing her what respect looks like, by being the example of what she should expect from the men in her life." They named her Caroline May Finley, after both their grandmothers. She arrived 3 days before her due date, after 12 hours of labor that Patrick coached Grace through with steady encouragement and hand holding that definitely left bruises. The first time Patrick held his daughter, Grace took a mental photograph of the moment. This strong, successful man reduced to tears by a 7-pound baby with a wrinkled face and shock of dark hair. Caroline opened her eyes and looked directly at her father, and Patrick was lost. "She is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. I cannot believe this is my life." Grace knew what he meant. She looked at her husband holding their daughter, thought about the woman she had been on that plane to Barcelona, scared and directionless and alone. That woman would never have believed this future was possible. But here it was, real and solid and more beautiful than any fantasy. Emma visited when Caroline was 2 weeks old, bearing gifts and food and helpful hands. Melissa came by nearly every day, completely smitten with her honorary niece. Grace's parents extended their stay to help with night feedings and laundry, and all the small, exhausting tasks that came with a newborn. Patrick took paternity leave, the first real break from work he had taken since starting Finley Industries. They spent long days in their condo, learning Caroline's rhythms, figuring out how to be parents together. It was harder than Grace expected, but also more rewarding, every small milestone feeling like a major victory. When Caroline was 3 months old, Grace returned to work part-time. Windsor had been incredibly supportive, allowing her to create a flexible schedule that let her be present for her daughter while still pursuing her career. Patrick's role had evolved to be more strategic and less hands-on, which meant he could work from home several days a week. They tag-teamed parenting with the same partnership that defined their marriage. Patrick did morning duty while Grace worked, then they would swap in the afternoon. Weekends were family time, exploring Chicago with Caroline in a stroller, introducing her to their favorite places. On Caroline's first birthday, they threw a party that filled their condo with family and friends. Caroline toddled between guests, delighted by the attention, smashing her cake with enthusiastic joy. Grace stood watching her daughter, feeling Patrick's arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That this is everything," Grace replied. "Everything I did not know I needed. That scared woman on a solo vacation to Barcelona would be amazed. She was brave enough to take a chance on a stranger in an elevator," Patrick pointed out. "That is not nothing." "We were both brave," Grace said. "We just did not know it yet." 2 years later, they had their second child, a boy they named Peter James. Caroline was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding to reading him stories. Patrick handled 2 kids with surprising grace. Though he admitted he felt outnumbered, Grace had been promoted again, now executive vice president of Windsor Hotels, overseeing operations across the Midwest region. It meant more responsibility, but also more flexibility to set her own schedule. Patrick's division had been spun off into its own subsidiary, with Patrick as CEO once again, but with a full executive team to handle day-to-day operations. They bought a house in a suburb with good schools, moving out of the condo when Peter was 6 months old. It had a big backyard where Caroline could run and a home office where they could both work when needed. Grace planted a garden, something she had never had space for in the city. Patrick built a swing set with Emma's help, the two siblings arguing about instructions while Grace and the kids watched from the porch. Life became a beautiful rhythm of school drop-offs and business meetings, family dinners and date nights, soccer games and dance recitals. Grace and Patrick made a point of traveling together at least once a year without the kids, maintaining their connection as a couple even as they poured themselves into parenting. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Patrick surprised Grace with a weekend in Barcelona. They left the kids with Emma and Grace's parents and flew across the ocean to the city where it all began. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. The hotel was still elegant, the Gothic quarter still charming, their favorite restaurant by the beach still serving the best paella. But they were different people now, weathered by real life and deepened by shared experience. "You ever regret it?" Grace asked as they walked barefoot on the beach at sunset, echoing their first night together. "Approaching me in that cafe, pursuing this when it seemed impossible." "Never," Patrick said firmly. "Not for a single second. You are the best decision I ever made. Even better than starting Finley Industries." "Not even close," he replied, pulling her into a kiss that still made her heart race after all these years. "The company is an accomplishment. You are my life." They returned home to chaos, Caroline having convinced her grandparents to let her paint murals on the basement walls and Peter having learned to climb out of his crib. But it was their chaos, their beautiful messy life that they had built together. Years passed in that strange way they do, both glacially slow and impossibly fast. Caroline started elementary school, developing a passion for science that made Patrick burst with pride. Peter proved to be artistic, covering every surface with drawings and paintings. Grace continued to rise at Windsor, eventually becoming chief brand officer, overseeing the company's entire global image. Patrick sold his stake in the subsidiary for an amount that made them both sit in stunned silence when the paperwork was finalized. He was 40 years old and could retire if he wanted. Instead, he started a non-profit focused on bringing sustainable packaging solutions to developing countries, working with local manufacturers to create jobs while reducing environmental impact. "I like this better than the company," he admitted to Grace one night. "The impact feels more direct, more real." "You are happier," Grace observed. "I can see it." "I have everything I need," Patrick said simply. "You, the kids, work that matters. What else is there?" When Caroline turned 10, they took a family trip to Barcelona. The kids were old enough to appreciate it now, to wander the Gothic quarter and eat paella and understand the significance of this city to their parents' story. "You really met here?" Caroline asked skeptically, looking between her parents. "That seems like something from a movie." "Sometimes real life is better than movies," Grace replied, exchanging a smile with Patrick over their daughter's head. They showed the kids' hotel Casa Marina, pointed out the elevator where they had first met. They went to the cafe where they had talked for hours, finding it exactly as they remembered. They climbed the steps to Palau National and watched the fountains dance, Caroline and Peter running ahead while Grace and Patrick followed hand in hand. "Best vacation ever," Peter declared that night, exhausted and happy. "I do not know," Patrick said seriously. "Your mom and I took a pretty great vacation here once." "Did you know then?" Caroline asked with the intensity only a preteen could muster. "That you would get married and have us?" Grace and Patrick looked at each other, having this conversation in the silent language married couples develop. "I knew I wanted to find out," Grace said finally. "I knew I had met someone special and I was scared but excited. the details we had to figure out as we went. That is what love is, Patrick added, taking a chance on someone and then choosing them every day after that. They returned home and life continued its forward march. Caroline went to middle school, then high school, developing into a thoughtful young woman who wanted to be an environmental engineer. Peter discovered theater, spending every free moment rehearsing for school productions. Grace looked at her teenagers and wondered where the babies had gone, even as she delighted in the people they were becoming. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Grace and Patrick renewed their vows in their backyard, surrounded by everyone who mattered. Emma stood beside Patrick again, her own husband and 2 kids watching from the audience. Melissa was there with her wife, married now herself. Their parents had aged but were still active, still delighted in their grandchildren. 15 years ago, I married my best friend, Patrick said in his vows. Today, I am choosing her again with full knowledge of what that means. Grace, you have been my partner in building a business, a family, a life that exceeds anything I imagined possible. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger in Barcelona. Thank you for every day since. Grace's vows were simpler. Patrick, you taught me that brave choices lead to beautiful outcomes. You showed me what real partnership looks like. Every day with you is still an adventure. Here is to 15 more years and 15 after that, and as many as we get. They danced as the sun set over their backyard, their children watching with the particular embarrassment and affection only teenagers could manage. Grace leaned her head on Patrick's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid reality of their life together. Happy? Patrick asked, echoing the question he had asked so many times over the years. Incredibly, Grace replied, the same answer she always gave because it never stopped being true. She thought about the woman she had been, desperate enough to quit her job and fly solo to Spain, looking for something she could not name. That woman had walked into a hotel lobby with no idea her life was about to completely transform. She had almost not talked to the man in the elevator, almost not agreed to dinner, almost walked away because the logistics seemed impossible. But she had been brave. They both had. And that bravery had built this. A marriage that strengthened instead of strained, children who were kind and curious and confident, careers that fulfilled instead of drained, a partnership that made them both better people. Sometimes Grace still could not quite believe it was real, that she got to live this life. She would catch Patrick's eye across a crowded room or feel his hand find hers without looking and be struck all over again by the miracle of it. That they had found each other, against all odds, and chosen each other every day since, the vacation fling that changed everything. The holiday romance that followed her home and never left. The man in the elevator who became her husband, her partner, her home. Grace tightened her arms around Patrick as they swayed to the music, surrounded by everyone they loved, and knew that she would make that choice again 1,000 times over. Every single time she would say yes to dinner, yes to taking a chance, yes to building this impossible, beautiful life together, because some things really were meant to be. You just had to be brave enough to believe it.